So good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here. This is our second class. I like to open every class with an opportunity to kind of settle our minds from whatever we were doing before, whether we were busy with caregiving or calling a pharmacy or whatever the heck we were doing. I like to arrive. So we'll be doing this every time, and I might vary how we do it, but I like it as well because it's an opportunity to review grounding practices. So I'll pick one of the grounding practices or maybe two, and we'll do them for just a moment to settle our minds to arrive. So when you're ready, just get yourselves really comfortable in whatever you're sitting on or lying down on. Please do what works for you. And just kind of settle into the chair, the couch, whatever you're on. And with the next in-breath, and when you breathe in, I'd like you to notice the sensation of the air as it enters your nostrils. Go. Let the out-breath take care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair beneath your sit bones, beneath your butt, however you like to think of it. But notice that sensation of support. And just notice if that's in any way quieted your mind or quieted your emotions a little bit or not. We're just experimenting right now. Let's do it one more time. On the next in-breath, please breathe in. Again, notice the sensation of the air as it enters your nostrils on the in-breath. Go. Out-breath takes care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair. Okay, and just because I know many of you said you wanted to try the heart breath, I'd like to ask you just to do 2 or 3 breaths like that. So on the next in-breath, simply breathe in at your own pace. Doesn't matter if it's through the nostrils or the mouth, whatever's comfortable. Just breathe in. Imagine that you're breathing directly into the center of your heart or your heart space. Could be the center of your chest. But imagine you're breathing into that place and on the out breath, out from that place. Please continue 2 or 3 breaths in the same fashion, just to remind yourself what that feels like. I'd also like to show you one more grounding technique that we didn't do last time. The grounding practice is referred to in the trade, if you will, as orienting. And it has to do with how we find safety in the middle of what's happening. So I'm going to give you a little background for this practice, and then I'll show you how it works. But it's based on something that's a very ancient response that is a biological one. It's been found that animals, when they're out in the wild, and they are more of a prey animal than a predator, so maybe an antelope or a zebra or a gazelle, they know that they have to maintain their safety. And they still need to drink water. So when they need to drink water, they don't want to just put their head down into the pool of water and not be looking out for any animal that might be about to attack them. So before they drink their water, they will pause and they'll turn their heads, literally their whole head, and they'll look to the right and they'll just scan the horizon going around all the way around to the left side. It could be right to left or left to right, that doesn't matter, but they're scanning the horizon to make sure at least it appears to be safe. And then they can put their head down and get their drink of water. In human beings, it's found that we are also responsive to that same kind of a scenario. So the practice in today's world is a little different because we're not antelopes and we're not in the middle of the African savannah, but nonetheless, our brain, the amygdala, the part of the brain that responds to danger, will get it that we've been scanning to see if we're safe, and it will act as a grounding practice, just like the one you just did. So here's how I was taught. I'm going to ask you to do it, but I want to explain it first, and then I'll ask you to do it. It's basically it's just putting your head over one shoulder as best you can, your chin like that, and then turning your head slowly, letting your neck swivel your head around to the opposite shoulder. So that's the physical thing. What you do with your mind is you look at whatever you see in front of your eyes as you turn your head from one side to the other. So, for example, when I'm doing it myself right now, I am seeing a door, and then I'm seeing a wall. Now I'm seeing a lamp. So what I'm asked to do when I'm doing this exercise is to name what I see silently in my own mind. But I'm still going to name it because I'm proving to my brain that I'm looking. So I'm going to go silently. Door, wall, lamp, picture, printer, closet, window. Very, very simple and very simple-minded. There are some variations on that exercise, works the same way. So I'd like to ask you to give it a try. So if you put your chin over one, as close as you can, over one of your shoulders, either one you like, and then slowly, very slowly swivel your head around to the opposite shoulder as you name what you see. Okay, that's it. That's the whole thing. You can try it out, mess around with it, and see how you like it. But I think it's an interesting one. It's there are variations on it. Some people say, find 5 yellow things in the room or 5 blue things. And it's the same exercise. You're trying to get the person, maybe someone doesn't want to do this whole antelope thing, and someone quickly tells their client or their patient, look around the whole room, keep looking until you name 5 things that are blue. I don't know, but I'm going around, I don't see anything but blue, blue. So, I see blue envelope, blue box, and you just keep going around until you do it. The idea is the same. When I first was taught this, you've got to actually move your head. That matters. That's the signal. That's the physical signal that gets through to the brain. Your eyes have to be looking, and your head has to be moving or turning to find safety. So that's the orienting. I think it's kind of fun. It's simple enough, but it's an interesting one. The topic today is going to be repertoire of stress responses. So continuing about stress. And then a particular practice for meeting difficult emotions, which I think for human, we probably have all kinds of emotions, easy ones and difficult ones. But what's a way of meeting difficult ones so we don't get totally stuck in them? And in preparation for that practice, I also will touch on a few basic facts about how emotions work with regard to a difficult situation. 3 or 4 facts that are useful to know before we do the practice. Jumping into the topic of stress responses, in the resources, there's a book there called The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal, which is actually fun to read, which surprised me. I went into it once looking for one piece of information, but it's a good book. But in it, she talks in some detail, if you have an interest in that, in how these different stress responses work. It's not only fight, flight, freeze. There are a number of other ways that we humans respond to stress, and they've been studied. So it's helpful to know a little bit about them as background. But I'm going to start from the very basic place where stress is generally caused because we see something or experience something or we're in a situation that seems dangerous on some level. Maybe danger is not the word we normally use for it in our words, in our current lives, but this is bad. I don't like it. And we feel stressed because we don't want to be there, which is generally a healthy response. Get me to a safer place. Get me to a place where I can be more okay. That's a good thing. We're pretty familiar in general, when I say we, I mean most people in our world, are pretty familiar with the ideas of fight, flight, freeze, of the fact that when I get stressed, my heart beats faster, I get upset. What we're less familiar with, there's another kind of a response, and you don't need to remember this one. I just thought it was kind of an interesting aside, but it's called the challenge response. And it's just interesting to know about. And this is very similar to fight, flight, freeze. It's the way the body responds is similar, but it's different. A fight, flight, freeze response is intended as a very short burst, a very short response that will allow us to get flooded with adrenaline so we can fight with the danger or get away from it fast, whatever we need to do. It's not intended to become chronic. And if we're constantly experiencing the fight, flight, freeze, it's called hypervigilance. It's where we get really upregulated all the time because we're always scanning for something going wrong right now. I would say as caregivers, that's pretty common. We do that a lot, but it's doing that chronically is worth noticing. See if we can settle it down a little bit, because physically it's not real great for us. The challenge response probably is not one that enters into our world that much. I'm just mentioning it to you to let you know about it, because I think it's interesting. There's a very similar response. Our hearts beat faster then too, but it's less unhealthy. That's the simplest way I can put it. It's okay if the challenge response goes on for a while. And it typically is in response to being in a situation where we need to respond at a peak performance level. You could call it a performance kind of a stress rather than a bad things happening kind of stress. For example, if either one of us were Olympic athletes and we were divers and we had to be on the high board and dive off and do a perfect dive, anything we're feeling then, it might be a rapid heartbeat, it might be our breath coming faster, is called the challenge response, and it's intended to prepare us. Our nerves prepare us to perform at our peak, at our best. They've tested it. They've tested it on surgeons and found that their eye-hand coordination is better if they understand the difference. This is not a fight, flight, freeze thing that's shutting you down. This can be your performance, challenge response that's making you better at what you do. So it helps athletes. It helps graduate students taking exams to get into more advanced graduate programs. It helps doctors. It's a very interesting challenge response. I call it performance response. A third type is quite different, and this one does affect us and does come into our world, perhaps depending on who we are. It's referred to popularly as the tend and befriend response, or the share and care response. Basically, what it means when it comes down to a stress response is, this situation is too hard for me. I can't do this by myself. I need to reach out and connect with someone else and get some help, or do it together. That's the response we're talking about. And it began to be studied in a rather interesting way. There's a lab that studies stress that's part of UCLA. It's run by, or used to be run by, a woman named Shelley Taylor, a doctorate down there that studied stress. And they were studying fight, flight, freeze. And some of the women that worked in the lab said, Shelley, I don't do that when I'm stressed. And she said, what do you do? She said, I call my girlfriends. We go out for a glass of wine, or we take a walk, or I just hang out with them. So she said, oh, well, maybe that's a female response, particularly for women, because we're caregivers and maybe we're used to doing that. And some of the men who worked in the same lab said, oh, no, you can't get away with that, because that's true for me too. When I get something that's really tough, I call my buddies and maybe we go out and have a beer. In any case, it just made her curious. So she and at her lab began to study it, and they called it the tend and befriend response because one of the people that worked there came up with that idea for it. But the idea is very interesting on an evolutionary basis. It's saying that as human beings, we're not saber-toothed tigers. So when something goes wrong for us, we don't generally go forward to attack. We generally solve things and have historically, meaning for millennia, we've solved things by affiliating, by reaching out, by getting together with other tribe members or other family members to figure things out. It's what we've done. So our bodies, to get back to the biology of it, our bodies still expect that of us. So when we're stressed, it doesn't mean that we should call up our friends and tell them all our problems. It just means we need to notice if we're allowing ourselves to become too chronically, again, it comes to the chronic word, are we becoming chronically isolated because of what's going on? And no one's going to tell you that. You're the only one that can notice that for yourself. But if you notice it, no matter what your normal personality would be when you're not being a care partner, if you notice, I'm kind of overdoing it here. I haven't talked to my friend so-and-so for like 3 months, and I'm just cut off from my normal life. Then I would say it's really important to reach out. And it does, again, as I said before, does not have to be to talk about your problems. It could be just, that my husband and I have been going through a lot right now. I miss you. I don't want to start talking about all that stuff. I think about it all the time. Tell me about your kids, or let's take a walk around the block, or let's plan a Zoom call on Thursday for a half hour, and keep it limited if that's all you feel up to. But, make the connections, reestablish the connections. That can be important for you and for your husband. So it could be, it's not an issue for you. It could be that you're staying interconnected with the people that you love you just do it all the time anyway. But for a lot of people, it's very easy without meaning to, very unintentionally, to become a bit isolated. So be aware of that and notice that that's important. And it helps us not to get blindsided by it. I guess that's what I'd say. They found that there are a lot of negative impacts on us physically if we allow ourselves to become chronically isolated. It's fine once in a while, doesn't matter. It's just if it's becoming chronic, we should notice it and find a way of countering it, of doing something to help get things back into where we want them to be again a little bit. Yeah. So that's really all I wanted to say about how stress responses work. Basically, that just being aware that there's a range of ways we respond, certainly being aware of the connection, the need for connection, that that's not a luxury. It's actually physically important biologically. So it's important to our immune response, to our health, and that we can control how much we do of it. So first I'll mention what the areas of difficult emotions, what I'm referring to. People might mean different things, but I'm saying in my mind, it's any flavor of sadness, anger, or fear. And I say any flavor because those words are like primary colors and they each have different shades. For example, nervousness is a shade of fear, if you think about it, right? Frustration is a flavor of anger. Or you can go to the opposite extreme. Anxiety is a flavor of fear. It's fear about the future. It's anxiety. Rage and fury could be a flavor of anger. So it can be lots of things, but any flavor of those things I would put in the category of difficult. They're not easy. They're real. The things people, different times we have different emotions. So that said, we'll get to that practice at the last part of the class. This part right now, I'll just mention the facts I'm thinking of. One of them is that neuroscientists have been studying emotions now, and so have social psychologists. And what they found is, believe it or not, emotions they last a pretty short time. They have a short shelf life. Unless we ruminate and keep the story going on and on and on, the emotions typically will be small, they'll get bigger, they'll get stronger, and then they'll go down again. That's the way they work. And they're fairly short duration. So that's fact number one. Fact number two is they come in waves. So they might be short duration, but they may come back again and again. For example, waves of grief. And can feel strong sense of grief, and then can be laughing about something else that's going on in your life at the same time. And then you can feel the wave of grief again. So they come in waves. And the waves have a shape. It varies. The shape can be different at different times, but it starts small, gets stronger, and then it goes down and gets weaker. So two facts were short shelf life. They come in waves. A third fact is, and this one's interesting, we know it, but we often forget it. We can be experiencing an emotion, fully experiencing it, not trying to make it go away or do anything else. I can be really angry, or I can be really sad, and I can be aware of it at the very same time. Right? If you asked me, how are you feeling right now? And I was feeling angry, I could say, I'm experiencing anger right now, even while I'm still angry. Right? So we have that capacity as humans. My little dog who's curled up in a ball beside me right now, when he gets angry, he's just angry. I don't think he's aware that he's angry. He's just angry. If I'm angry, I don't always do this, but I have the ability to notice, oh, this is me being angry. That's what's going on right now. So that's an important one that we'll come back to. And the last one is that when an emotion, let's say there's the wave action of an emotion, it's small, it gets bigger, gets to a peak, it comes down again. When it's at its peak, when it's at its strongest, it is said to be refractory. So I, of course, had to ask, what are you talking about? Because I've heard of refractory pain. That means it's breakthrough pain. What do you mean, a refractory emotion? And the way it was explained to me by the scientists who study it is that when an emotion is at its peak, our perception of our world becomes narrowed so that all we see is what the emotion is telling us. They call that the perception becomes gated or narrowed, like wearing blinders. So what that means, and I use this as a silly example, but let's say if I'm angry with my brother that I mentioned, if I'm angry with him, I can just be angry with David. I'm good at that. I'm used to doing it. I've been doing it since I was 10 years old, right? I know how to be angry at David. But I can be angry at David, and I can also go, oh, this is anger. I can be aware of it. So that part's one of them. The refractory part means while I'm angry with David, I believe whatever my emotions are telling me. David's a jerk. What he just said was the wrong thing to say. It was a stupid thing to say. He shouldn't be doing that. All of that might be inside my story about David, even though I know it may not be totally accurate. It's how I feel. It's what I think. And the reason I think that's important to realize is that when we're in the grips of a strong emotion, we're kind of carried away by it. So if there's two people that are arguing, I mean, that's kind of funny when you think about it. They're both trying to explain what they mean by something, and neither one can hear the other person because they believe their own story is the truth. So sometimes it's good just to wait till things settle down again and quiet down, and then talk about whatever it is that's going on. But talking about it when you're in the grips of the emotion usually is kind of hard. So those are the 4 facts I'd like to just make you aware of. The practice has 3 parts. The first part, it's the most important part, is noticing what's going on. It's noticing if we're angry. It's noticing if we have grief. If we don't notice, it's, all bets are off. We're down the rabbit hole and we'll do whatever we've done all our lives. We won't even know what's happening. We're too busy feeling the emotion. So the step number 1 is, can I notice what's happening right now? Step number 2, can I name it? Oh, step number 1 is noticing it and naming it. So So I want to notice it's anger and say, oh, this is anger. And there's a particular way to do it, which I'll explain in a minute, but I want to just tell you the steps first. So the first step is noticing. Second step is finding if there's anywhere in your body that feels a little bit like a knot, a little bit of tension or tightness that might be associated with that emotion. Example, one night, the night before I was supposed to have surgery and I was scared. I felt like I had a knot in my stomach. And that's what I mean by feeling it in our bodies. My surgery had nothing to do with my stomach, but that's where I felt the tension. I felt like a knot in my stomach. So it's finding it in our bodies if we can. And then the third part is a little repetitious, where we notice that place in our bodies, like I would notice my knot in my stomach. And while I'm feeling that knot, I say a word, soften, and then the word soothe, and then the word allow. And the reason for those things is it helps us soften in our bodies around the area that's associated with the tension or the stress. And it's very interestingly effective. It's not, most of the things I'll teach you are things you can do on the fly. This one, I find it's easier to do when I'm in a quiet room. I mean, how am I going to do that while I'm having a conversation with someone? Probably won't work. So I will tell you a little more about that night before surgery, just so you can hear how this worked for me as I went through it. And then I'm going to ask you, I'm going to warn you this in advance, I'm going to ask you to see if you can think of a time, sometime within the last day or week, when you were feeling a difficult emotion. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most difficult emotion you could imagine, I want you to pick something that was at about a level 4. Right? We're in class now. I don't want you to pick something that when you think of it, you get all upset all over again. But I want it to be strong enough, a level 4, that you can remember how you felt at the time. And then we'll go through the practice. So that night before surgery, I couldn't sleep. I was too anxious. I really couldn't sleep. I was too nervous. And I don't do well with taking sleep aids. So I hadn't taken anything to help me sleep and I couldn't sleep. So I thought, no problem, I'll read something. I could not make myself concentrate on the words. I was too worried. So that didn't work. So I thought, fine, I'm in the hospital right now. The night before, I'll turn on the television, I'll watch something. Couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand the sound of the voices. I thought, that's not good. I'll turn it off. I thought, turn some music on. Couldn't stand that. It's crazy. I just was totally into the emotion, I guess. I don't know. All I know is none of those things worked for me. And I was feeling a little desperate because I didn't know what to do to get my mind off of being so anxious about it. And I thought, I'm going to do that dumb exercise because it'll give me something to do. That's the only reason I did it. I did it to pass the time. I did it for something to do. So I was lying in bed, and the first part was easy. And so I thought, I actually went through the steps. So first I named the emotion, and it was, the tone of voice matters when you do this. It can't be, I'm so upset that I feel anxiety right now. It has to be a neutral voice and not emotional voice. It's the same kind of voice you would use if you're saying, oh, I get it. This is anxiety. So that's what I did. I silently said to myself, oh, this is anxiety. Okay, so I did that. I thought, okay, now I'm supposed to find it in my body. So that's easy. I know my stomach's got a knot. It's my stomach. That's where I feel it. And if I hadn't known where I felt it, if I couldn't tell, they say you can do a little bit of a body scan very gently. Do I feel it in my head, behind my eyes, in my jaw? And if none of that worked, you just pick a place that makes sense. You know, it could be, I had one doctor I was teaching it to. She had just gotten a real difficult diagnosis herself. And she was very upset about it, but she wanted to try this out. So she said, I don't feel it anywhere. I said, well, what makes sense to you? She said, I feel it in my brain. I said, fine. Let your brain be the part that you're going to imagine where you're feeling the tension. So you can pick anything you want. And then once you pick a place, I always recommend putting your hand there if you can, because it helps you remember to keep your attention there. So in the case of that doctor, she did this. She just put her hand on top of her head. And in the case of me, I put my hand on my belly. But you put your hand on it. And again, that is not required. That putting your hand on it isn't required. I just find it's useful. The next part of it helps me remember to keep my attention there. So let's say, we'll pretend it's the doctor because you can see me. Put your hand on your head. And then step 3, we did step 1, we did step 2. Step 3 is repeating those words. So you do them one at a time. First word is soften. And all that I need to do is picture the place beneath my hand. And in my case, that night before the hospital, I pictured the place right underneath my hand, which was my stomach. And I silently repeated the word soften about 3 or 4 times. And I said, soften, soften, soften. I was not trying to make I said, I'll do it like I did it that night, because that's the one I know. So I put my hand there on my stomach and I said, soften, soften, soften. Now, I was not trying to make my stomach go soft. I wasn't trying to make it do anything. I was just saying the word while my hand was there. And I was picturing that area. I was picturing my stomach saying soften, soften. Very interesting. I could feel the tension kind of loosening as I did that. I was very surprised, but that's what happened. And then I released that word and went to the second word. And the second word was soothe, soothe, soothe. And again, just say the word soothe. And then you release that word and you say the third word, and it's the last one, allow, allow, allow. I remember when I learned this practice, I said, why would I want to say allow? I don't like this difficult emotion. I want it to go away. And I was told by the psychologists that were teaching it to me, they said, yeah, but you don't want to get into a fight with it either. I thought that was pretty smart, because otherwise, right, I'm doing this sort of thing. Is no, just allow, just let it be there. You know, it's a wave. You know, if you don't hang on to it, it will soften and go away, but you need to kind of soften around it and then let it be, let it do its thing. So I did that exercise. And what really surprised me when I finished it was that I didn't feel so tense anymore. I didn't feel so anxious. And I also felt a bit of confidence. I guess that's the right word. I thought, my gosh, this works. And if I start feeling anxious again, I can just do it again. I don't have to worry about it. I can just do it again. And I loved knowing that that was sort of there for me, that I could use that. And at that point, then I just got through the night okay. Some of the time I was awake, some of the time I drifted off a little bit, but it wasn't like this, the whole time. It just really made a difference. So I find that's a useful one. There's someone else that I didn't expect she would want this or even like it. She was a physician at UCSF, a pain doc. And she said, oh no, I want to learn that one, because sometimes I'm working with people that act really angry towards me because their pain is so bad. And she said, it's hard. She said, I carry it around with me and I don't want to do that. So she loved this one. She was going to go and teach it to the fellows that worked for her. So I thought that was kind of fun to know. But let's try it out. And the way you try it out, again, is you bring something to mind. So if you would, please, you could allow your eyes to close, to gently close, or to drop your gaze so you're not looking at the screen, so you're not distracted by my face or anything. And see if you can bring to mind the time that you have chosen to remember when you felt a difficult emotion. There may have been lots of them, you're picking one for practice. So bring it to mind. And when you bring it to mind, I'd like you to really picture where you were. What room are you in this memory? What did it look like to you? What were you looking at in front of your face? Who were you with? What kinds of words have been spoken, if any were? Or what was the situation? And again, where were you? What do you see? What do you hear? See if you can really go back to that spot. And once you're there, notice any tension that you're feeling. Notice how it feels. Hopefully it's about a level 4, give or take, something like that. Something you can still notice. Notice how you felt. And now see if you can name the emotion in a voice that is very neutral, that sounds a little bit like, I get it. And you're going to do this silently. So in your own mind, you're going to say, oh, this is whatever it was. This is frustration. This is anger. You can use whatever word you think is accurate. And now I'm going to ask you, where in your body do you feel any tension or tightness that might have to do with this emotion? And if you're not sure, I would always recommend a body scan first. Just continue to remember the situation, where you were, how you felt, so you can kind of continue to feel that emotional tension. And then, do you feel any of that tension in the top of your head? Do you feel any of it in your eyes or behind your eyes? Or might you feel something in your jaw? Or do you feel it in your throat? Kind of working our way down the body. Do you feel it at all in your throat? Or do you feel it in your shoulders? Or how about your shoulder blades? You feel it back there. Or do you feel any associated tightness in your chest? Letting your attention drift down a little bit. Do you feel anything in your waist or in your belly? And if you feel it in one of those places, then I would ask you to place your hand over top of that part of your body. If you feel it in 3 or 4 places, can you pick the one that's the strongest to you, the one that makes the most sense? Or if you don't feel it anywhere, can you pick a place in your body that makes sense to you, where you might feel some tension associated with this emotion? And go ahead and put your hand or hands on top of that part of your body. And once your hands are there, I'd like you to picture that part of your body. Let the hand be the reminder. Picture underneath your hand. And as you're holding that image in your mind, silently say the word soften about 3 or 4 times. Soften, 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 soften. And now just release the word soften. Keep your hand on that part of your body and say the word soothe, 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 soothe. Now releasing the word soothe, say the word, keeping your hand on that part of your body, picturing the area of your body right underneath your hand. and say the word allow, 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 allow. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I didn't totally put you to sleep. Come back into the room. Yeah. And just notice how you feel in relationship to that particular difficult emotion that you felt. I find that it's especially helpful for not getting rigidly stuck in the difficult emotion. It's for real, it's difficult, but something that allows me, I think it allows the natural wave action of the emotion to be restored so that we can it can kind of soften. We're able to relax for a few minutes. We can catch our breath. And that catching our breath, I think, is really helpful. And then it's a wave. It might come back again later, but you can do it again later. Mm-hmm. That's the practice. And where it comes from, I forgot to tell you that, so I will now. It comes from a program that's called the Mindful Self-Compassion Program. It was developed by two psychologists, and they were aware of a lot of the research around compassion, as well as psychology. Of course, that's their field. And they were very curious, and they made up this program, and they have some practices within it. But this is one of the practices in it. And they have a website. And on their website, if you wanted to just practice it, they have a voice recording of someone leading that, and you can listen to it and practice it if you'd like. But they have a number of different helpful practices, but that's one of them. They were particularly aware of and interested in emotions and how emotions work for people, as you can imagine, since they're both clinical psychologists as well as research psychologists. So they have put this practice together. So it's a good one, and I hope you have some fun trying it out. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. May the goodness that arises through our practice be for the good of all beings everywhere, including ourselves.